Yeah, and Greeny, listen, put this in context. Like any great player that you could name, right? Any top 20 player historically of all time, when their name comes up, you immediately will go to those signature moments, games, right? It's very specific that's going to come into your immediate recall. Usually, those guys are done with those types of moments by the time you're 35 years old. That's why this is so stunning. To be able to do that and put up historic numbers in a Game 7, something no one has ever done in the history of the game with what's at stake. That's what we watched yesterday. We've seen, the array of shot making at various times, but to put it all together in one game with so much on the line and a chance to continue, this run here in the playoffs and potentially just add to this Warriors legacy in the Steph Curry era, you just don't see that at this stage of a player's career. And yet, here he is, having done it. Now, look, some people are going to say this is the greatest performance for Steph of all time. It's going to be difficult for me to say this is better than Game 4 last year in the NBA Finals because, to me, when it happens in a series that has potential to lead to a championship the way that one did a year ago, it's a little bit more significant than this. But look, I'm nitpicking here. Flip a coin, take your pick. Steph Curry just gave us another one yesterday.
Here's what I will say, because their job is to play and our job is to chronicle it and to try and put it into some historical perspective. I think what Steph Curry has done in the last 2 years, meaning last season and this, is completely rewrite his legacy. I think that is not overstating it. Steph Curry was the greatest shooter that ever lived and a player who it was difficult to quantify his historical greatness because he had never been the MVP of a finals, because there remained some questions. What he has done is answer all of those at the ages of 34 and 35 by being the dominant player in the finals last year, leading his team to another championship. With days like this, I think Steph Curry has put an end to any of those questions and now has put himself legitimately into the conversation with the greatest players of all time, not the greatest circus show of all time. Oh, look, come watch the little guy shoot. Now, all of a sudden, he has put himself in the discussion with the best players that ever played the sport. And I think the last 2 years, Monica, have done that.
I would have to agree, Greeny. The last 2 years in particular certainly add a level of gravitas to a legacy that already was Hall of Fame worthy in my mind. I think prior to that, you continue to look at the team dynamic of the Warriors, right? You could say, oh, Kevin Durant was there. Oh, they took people by surprise when they went on their first initial run. Like, it was still very much a team thing around the whole system. In the last 2 years, to your point, Steph has clearly, if there were questions, asserted himself as the guy that stirs the entire pot. I think internally, the Warriors know that already, but now you look at the gaudy performances like we got in Game 7, and there are very few questions left to ask about that.
Because the ridiculous part of it, Legs, is he's getting better. I mean, maybe that's what I'm trying to say, is that he's going up against LeBron now, another one with an historical resume that can still be added to, and we'll see what happens here. But the point is, Legs, Steph is getting better. He's getting older, but he's getting better. He's never played better than he's playing in these last 2 years.
Yeah, that's fair to say. And I think one of the things that we don't give him enough credit for, we don't talk about it enough. This is one of the most highly conditioned players this league has ever seen, right? To be able to play the way he plays, with the frenetic pace that he plays with, to do the amount of running that he does in the course of a game without the basketball. Most players are just not willing to do it. He understands how important that component is, not only for himself, but what that leads to for his team because of the amount of communication it takes to be able to guard him, to know where he is, to communicate the screens, and the attention he commands, how much easier it makes the game for everybody else. And we just never talk about how highly conditioned he is. I mean, a Game 7, first of all, the anxiety level is going to take your legs and your lungs alone. So to be able to play through that and then go, 20 for 38 from the field, 38 shots when the entire focus of the defense is on you, and deliver a 50-point performance on the road. I just think we got to give this guy more credit for being such a highly motivated and highly conditioned athlete at this stage of his career.
100%. I don't think it's overstating it to say that 2 years ago today, Steph Curry was a first ballot Hall of Famer.
For sure.
Today, he's one of the 10 greatest players of all time. And I don't think that's overstating the impact of what the last 2 years have done. That said, as we continue to debate that, He goes on. And now we get it at least one more time in our lives, something that I don't think any of us, well, we certainly weren't assured we would ever see again after they met in the finals 4 straight years. We get Steph Curry versus LeBron James starting tomorrow. The Warriors have home court advantage. It's a 6-7 matchup, but it feels like Ali Frazier. Talk to me, Monica. Give me the thumbnail on the series.
Oh, all right. Immediate thumbnail. The Warriors continue to improve game by game in their series versus the Kings outside of Game 6, which we'll just call an outlier because they have bad spacing. I think this Warriors team, similar to the Lakers, is not the team that we saw over the course of the regular season. Gary Payton II, Andrew Wiggins have been huge contributions or additions back into this roster. They are playing with continuity. They are playing with tremendous experience and momentum coming into this series. On the other side, I said that Anthony Davis was the key to that Memphis Grizzlies series. I think the same sort of mentality could potentially apply, but across the board, the Lakers are going to have to rise to the challenge of defending this Warriors' potent offense. Now, as gaudy and privileged and talented as Steph Curry is, there is LeBron James on the other side, and I think his sheer will is going to make this series particularly interesting, but I just wonder about the collective experience if I had to find something to separate the two of these teams, and that advantage goes to the Warriors camp.
What's the biggest difference? Again, Steph and LeBron, the historical rivals, we could talk about that forever, Legs, but what is the biggest difference in this series as it begins tomorrow night?
I think for me, look, defensively, it's going to be an issue for the Lakers. There's no doubt, because I just don't think they've necessarily got the personnel on the perimeter to deal with what you have to with Golden State, off the basketball, where your head has to be on a swivel, and the amount of runs you have to stop, because it's one thing to go on a 10-0 run against Golden State. Like, at no point are they going to be fazed by any situation they find themselves in. You saw what happened with Memphis, particularly in that last game. Once things started to get a little bit sideways, they completely collapsed. That's not going to happen with the Warriors. No matter what their situation they find themselves in, you've got to continue to concentrate for 48 minutes defensively against them. Very few teams have the personnel, the scheme, the game plan to do that, and I don't necessarily think the Lakers do. Having said all of it, if Anthony Davis is the best player in this series, the Lakers have a legitimate shot to win it. So I agree with Monica. He is the key because he is that unique. He's got to be more consistent than he was in the last round to give the Lakers a shot.
That's such a good point. Let's bookmark that and come back to it later in this hour. Because for all the talk about LeBron and all the talk about Steph, the one whose legacy might actually be rewritten in the next 2 weeks is Anthony Davis if he carries the Lakers through this. We'll talk about it much more as we continue. In the meantime,
he can always building. So we've been debating on this show this morning whether Steph Curry, not that he doesn't belong in the top 10.
Here's what I'm going to say, though. Okay, man? Max, Jay, I want you to come out clean. I don't want any low belts. I don't want anything below the belt. I don't want any problems. I don't want anything. All right? I want to make it clean. You got your point, Max. You got your point, Jay.
Yeah.
All right? Both of you guys are clean fighters. All right? Now come out, go to your corners, and come out swinging. Ding, ding.
So, and Jay, you correct me if I'm misrepresenting the case so we can get to the calls, but you're saying that...
Why don't we just take the calls because you always misrepresent the case?
Well,
I
okay,
just
now for that, I might as well misrepresent his case.
That's one below the belt. I'm going to take a point away from you, Jay.
So Jay,
why does he have to represent my case? I can represent my own case.
Because so we don't get into an argument about it, I just quickly present the cases and get to the calls. We could be on the calls already, by the way. Jay, you think it's incredible what Steph is doing at his size. No one near his size has ever been considered the best player on earth, and yet he is it, last couple of years, certainly, having been the defending finals MVP and then doing what he's doing now. I say, while that's remarkable, it is incredible, I don't give him extra credit on the all-time list because basketball rewards size. So it's harder for you if you're shorter, and it's more incredible if you do it, but I don't elevate you on the list because of that. All right. I think that's a fair representation unless you disagree of our positions. Greg in Ohio, you're on KJM ESPN Radio.
Hey, guys. Man, awesome discussion. For sure, what he's doing at his height is amazing. Can't argue with that. It's absolutely astounding. But by Jay's standards, then Shaquille O'Neal is a lesser player because he has height, skills, and weight to do better.
Cut both ways.
No, I don't see how you can change. How can you change his status based on their size? I don't buy it.
How does that equate to Shaquille being a lesser player?
If you're giving extra credit for Steph for being short.
If Steph is a better player because he's smaller, then if Shaquille O'Neal is bigger Well, it's easier for him. He's not as great because he was already given this stuff.
Well, no, it was easier for Shaquille. That's
it was easier for Shaquille. It was easier for him.
Yeah, it was easier for Shaquille.
He's clearly not as good a player. If he was smaller, he wouldn't be. He wouldn't be good.
Shaquille is nowhere close to
down on the list.
Shaquille is nowhere close to as skilled as Steph Curry is.
But do you penalize Shaq on the all-time list for being big?
I don't penalize him. I'm just if you're.
No, if you're
6'11", 360 pounds, you're going to tell me it's not going to be
You're supposed
easier?
to do that.
Made him shorter.
You're supposed to do that if you're that big.
What?
That's what Jay is saying. Jay is simply saying, when you are big, you clearly have an advantage.